first, let's talk about crime. Well, basically, last year, 2 million criminals literally got away with it. 2 million cases of crimes were closed by the police without them even identifying possible suspects. So the crime happened, not even a suspect in sight. The case is closed. We see these stories all the time. Police seem to be solving fewer and fewer crimes. And you have to ask the question, what are they for? If you're not solving crimes, what's the point? Now, let's talk to the leader of the Greater London Authority Conservatives and chairman of the Police and Crime Committee, Susan Hall. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Kevin.
This is an all too familiar story. Usually it's just that they haven't solved the crimes. Now we learn many of them, in 2 million cases, they weren't even close to solving the crime because they never even identified any potential suspects. So they're not even getting anywhere near solving 2 million crimes last year. This is unacceptable, isn't it?
Well, it sounds dreadful, and if you're one of those 2 million people that have had their car broken into or their bicycle stolen or whatever, I completely agree how annoying it would be. But we also have to look at the fact that if we take a bicycle, if a bicycle is stolen, somebody reports my bicycle is gone, there's no CCTV anywhere, nobody saw anything happening, where would the police start? Yeah. Now, it helps if said bicycle has got something like smart water, that identification fluid that you can put on. And lots of safer neighbourhood teams are actually doing that free of charge for residents' bikes, etc. So at least if that bike is found, one could reunite it with the owner. But in all fairness, there's lots of crimes that happen where there's no evidence, no CCTV, nobody that comes forward to the police and says, I saw this happening. And that would really help if the public got more involved. But of course, then we need more trust and confidence in the police, which, of course, is an issue with the Met Police, with whom I deal with a lot.
It certainly is, and they're second in the charts of the 5 worst forces when it came to crimes with no suspect being identified. So these are the percentages. The British Transport Police, that's 62.8%, nearly 63% of crimes committed on transport systems were closed. The cases were closed before a suspect was even identified. 54.2% in the Met, that's terrible. 47% in the City of London and 46% in the West Midlands. Now, I take your point. If somebody nicks a bike and no one sees it, very difficult. But I think, Susan, this does play into an increasing attitude that we sense the police have about too many crimes. We know they don't bother investigating car thefts. They don't bother investigating burglaries. They seem all too keen to close the cases as soon as they can, rather than doing a bit of old-fashioned police work, unless, of course, they're chasing people who might be guilty of hate crimes on Twitter.
Well, that's a different subject, and I've always agreed with you all on that. But when you come back down to the cases that they write off, if you like, because there's no evidence, there's nowhere that they can find who might have committed that crime, we have to accept it. Where do they go from there? If it's a bike or somebody's stolen something out of a car, where on earth do you go to start looking? I mean, I was sent details recently from on a WhatsApp group of hooded people trying to get into cars at night time. Well, they're so hooded, even the CCTV footage that I was sent, you've got absolutely no idea who they are. And you have to look up, is it worth the police's while searching for something that could be £100 or less, whatever, as opposed to looking at the more serious crimes.
Here's a worrying statistic that they list the criminal offences that account for the highest proportion of cases that are not solved or even have a suspect identified. And one of them is arson. Nearly 73%, 72.6%. There was a suggestion that some of the fires on the outskirts of London last week were started deliberately. Again, I take the point, difficult to find someone who puts a match to a field and runs off, but quite worrying, though.
I think antisocial behaviour in all its forms is more and more worrying as the years go by. People seem to find it acceptable to cause antisocial behaviour, whether it's at the worst end, lighting fires, causing problems to the neighbours, etc., etc. I think the public do need to take a certain amount of public responsibility. In the old days, you used to say, well, go and tell a police officer. People don't say that anymore because trust and confidence is so low in policing. And that is something that's got to be addressed, because if, for instance, you live next to somebody and they have lots of different bikes going in and out of their house, as an example, then, you know, you would know that something wrong was going on there. There was lots of people know people that do things that are against the law, and it beggars the thought, why don't they do something about that? Why don't they report? Because that would help the police. The police can't solve all the crimes on their own. They need the public's assistance to do that. Now, in many cases, they are wrong. I accept that unreservedly. But equally, we've got to look at the other part of it. How much time do we want the police spending on a crime that is just unsolvable if you just cannot find the person that caused that crime?
Now, this is obviously we're discussing this issue on a national basis, but to come closer to home for you, to the capital city, London, Met Police they're in measures. They're basically on detention, being monitored because they actually didn't effectively investigate 60,000 crimes last year, which is ridiculous. Now, your opposite number, Mr. Khan, Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, he seems to spend all his time trying to sort out the environment, making sure the air is clean. He doesn't seem to concentrate very much on whether or not the streets of the capital city are safe.
No, he doesn't. I mean, we'll see him concentrating more and more on the environment because it's the only thing he's got a semi-good story to tell. Everything else he goes near is a disaster. He's in charge of transport in London, and, we could go on for hours about that. He's in charge of the police, which for the first time in its history, it's gone into what they call engage, which is sort of special measures for the police. There are all sorts of issues. Of course, he won't go near them because he's got a bad reputation on them. Sadiq Khan is hopeless.
Well, I agree. What is it now? 2 years after Sarah Everard's sad fate when she was murdered by a serving police officer, women do not feel safe on the streets of this city, do they?
No, lots of women don't, and that needs to be addressed. Again, it's trust and confidence in the police that does not help. And I would say to everybody out there, just be kind to others. And I wouldn't have let my daughter walk around on her own. We've got to protect those we love. All of us have, whether it's, friends going home together at the end of an evening, as opposed to them both going home separately, etc., etc. It's not ideal in any which way, but we've got to find ways of solving these different problems.
And can you tell Mr. Khan from me that you won't make the streets safer for women by setting up more and more low-traffic neighbourhoods, which is all he seems to do?
Yes, absolutely, 100%, Kevin. Not that he listens to a word I say, I'm afraid.
When's the next mayoral election?
2 years, just under 2 years' time.
What do you reckon?
I don't know whether he'll stand or not. We don't know yet.
Well, I think he sees himself as a future leader of the Labour Party, doesn't he?
Well, I think he did. I think that surely the Labour MPs have taken a look at the mess he's made of London and decided that perhaps that wouldn't be a good idea. Who knows?
Indeed. And what about the new leader of the new Met Police chief? What's his name? Rowley?
Not Rowley. Yeah. I'm hoping to get to see him. I think it's helpful that he's been away from the Met for a few years. So he's been on the outside looking in. And sometimes you can be more objective doing that. So let's hope so. Every one of us must want the police to do well in London.
And so you've yet to meet Mr. Rowley, but you have it's Sir Mark, isn't it? You have high hopes for him?
Yes, I do. I'd met him when he was with the Met previously, but I haven't seen him in his new position, and I'm hoping to.
Yeah. Call me cynical, but the fact that he's already knighted for his services to policing makes me slightly suspicious that he might not be the new broom the Met Police so sorely need.
The trouble is, Kevin, it's such a big organisation. Really, to have somebody that knows how it works is of benefit. He did incredible work in counter-terrorism before. So he knows how the Met works. Hopefully he knows how it's got to change, and he'll put in measures to make a difference. We must all hope for that.
And one last point, Susan, can we ask Sir Mark to bring in a zero tolerance policy on these coppers who take part in those awful WhatsApp groups talking about rape and murder and swapping pictures of murder victims? Those people should not remain in the police force. They have done so far.
Those messages were shocking, and I hope that sort of behaviour stops, because the vast majority of our frontline officers, I think there's 34,000 of them now in the Met, are disapproved completely. They really do. I don't believe it's constitutionally racist or anything else. I just think it reflects society, and there are mainly
bad apples in the barrel. Always. Susan, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. That's Susan Hall, leader of the Greater London Authority Conservatives and chairman of the Police and Crime Committee.